What if Donald Trump's threat to block a major international bridge was never about protecting American interests? What if the timing of that threat, just hours after a private meeting between his Commerce Secretary and a billionaire bridge owner, reveals something far more problematic? Because tonight, Republican lawmakers are joining Democrats in demanding answers. This is no longer partisan politics. This is institutional accountability, questioning whether federal authority was deployed to protect a donor's monopoly. And the optics are becoming indefensible. The Gordie Howe International Bridge connects Windsor to Detroit. It represents a multi-billion-dollar public infrastructure project jointly funded by Canada and Michigan, backed by binding international agreements and bipartisan support. Yet, Donald Trump publicly threatened to block its opening. That threat appeared on Truth Social. Trump claimed the bridge undermines American sovereignty. He suggested it represents Canadian overreach. He framed his opposition as defending national interests. But the threat arrived with suspicious timing. And that timing is now the subject of congressional investigation. Just hours before Trump's public statement, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick reportedly met with representatives connected to the Maroon family. The Maroon family owns the Ambassador Bridge, the privately held crossing that has operated as a near monopoly over commercial truck traffic between Windsor and Detroit for decades. The Gordie Howe Bridge directly threatens that monopoly. It introduces competition, it reduces private control, it shifts leverage from a billionaire family to public infrastructure. The Maroon family has opposed the Gordie Howe project for years. They have lobbied against it. They have funded legal challenges. They have retained firms with direct access to Trump's inner circle. Matthew Marone is a documented Trump donor. His family's company retained a lobbying firm tied to Trump's chief of staff. Then, hours after Lutnick's meeting with Marone representatives, the President of the United States issued a public threat against the project that competes with the Maroon family's private asset. That sequence is not abstract. That sequence is why Congress is now demanding emails, text messages, and calendar records. The distinction between public infrastructure and private monopoly matters here. The Ambassador Bridge is a privately owned asset. It generates revenue for a single family. It operates as a toll-based business. The Gordie Howe Bridge is publicly funded. It was built to serve the broader economic interest of two nations. It reduces dependency on private infrastructure. It ensures redundancy in case of emergency. It modernizes customs processing. It improves freight efficiency. These are not equivalent projects. One serves private profit, the other serves public trade. If a private donor who stands to lose revenue from public competition meets with senior administration officials, and federal power is then used in a way that protects that donor's financial position, the question becomes unavoidable. Was trade policy shaped by national interest or by donor influence? This is not speculation. This is why Congressman Robert Garcia is formally requesting documentation. Garcia chairs oversight efforts on the House committee responsible for investigating potential conflicts of interest. He is demanding emails, texts, and meeting records tied to Lutnick's contact with Maroon representatives. He is asking whether a politically connected billionaire influenced infrastructure policy. Garcia's statement was direct. He called it unacceptable for a donor to shape federal decisions impacting billions in cross-border trade, noting that interference could increase congestion and disrupt supply chains. He framed this as institutional integrity, not partisan disagreement. That framing shifts the story from Trump versus Canada to Trump versus accountability. What makes this even more politically damaging for Trump is that criticism is not limited to Democrats. Michigan Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib described the situation as billionaire corruption being par for the course in the current White House. She questioned why a private bridge owner would be meeting with administration officials right before the president threatened a safer, more efficient competitor. But Tlaib is a known Trump critic. Her opposition was expected. What was not expected was discomfort from Republicans. Michigan Republicans are publicly puzzled by Trump's position. A Republican senator from the state has asked Canadians to look past Trump's rhetoric. emphasizing the need for long-term relationship stability. That is not strong endorsement. That is distancing language. When a Republican lawmaker tells a foreign country to ignore the president's statements, it signals internal unease. It suggests the position is politically untenable, even within Trump's own party. Michigan Congresswoman Hillary Scholten introduced legislation specifically designed to prevent federal interference in the bridge's opening. The bill, titled the Michigan-Canada Partnership Act, is a preemptive move to block administrative sabotage. Lawmakers are not waiting for Trump to act. They are moving legislatively to prevent him from acting. That reflects a lack of trust in executive judgment. It reflects concern that donor influence could override economic logic. This is where the narrative shifts. Trump framed his threat as defending sovereignty. But if documentation shows that his threat followed direct engagement with a donor whose private monopoly stands to lose from public competition, that framing collapses. It is no longer about strength. It is about favoritism. It is no longer about America first. It is about billionaire first. And once that perception takes hold, it is difficult to reverse. The political optics are devastating. The image of a billionaire meeting a senior official, followed hours later by a presidential threat that benefits that billionaire's business, is visually and narratively simple. It does not require complex explanation. It does not need partisan spin. The timeline speaks for itself. And timelines that speak for themselves become politically fatal. Trump built his identity on fighting elites and representing working-class Americans against corrupt insiders. But if this becomes defined as using federal authority to protect a donor's monopoly, that identity fractures. Populism cannot survive donor favoritism. If records confirm coordination, this will not be a policy debate. It will be a scandal. Experts have noted that Trump could theoretically use federal staffing authority to obstruct the bridge. He could withhold U.S. Customs and Border Protection personnel from the Detroit side, effectively rendering the bridge non-operational. That is not hypothetical leverage. That is operational interference. If federal staffing decisions are weaponized to protect a private business interest, that crosses a line from aggressive policy into corrupt practice. And that distinction matters legally, politically, and institutionally. Even Trump's rhetoric undermines his position. He posted a rambling statement claiming his remarks were jokes, accused Canadian leaders of being a disaster, and insisted Canada has ripped off the United States. But none of that addresses the core allegation or explains why Lutnick met with Maroon representatives hours before the threat. Deflection does not answer institutional questions. It reinforces them. Mark Carney has not escalated. He has not issued inflammatory statements. He has not engaged in public confrontation. Instead, he has allowed the story to unfold inside Washington. That is strategic discipline. By remaining calm, Carney enables American lawmakers to defend the bridge without appearing to respond to foreign pressure. The defense comes from within the U.S. political system. It comes from Republicans and Democrats. It comes from Michigan's congressional delegation. Carney does not need to argue the case. The institutional response is making the case for him. This approach reflects a broader strategic principle. When an opponent is creating their own political damage, the optimal move is often restraint. Trump's impulsive threat triggered congressional oversight. His donor ties created investigative momentum. His contradictory explanations fueled skepticism. Carney did not cause any of that. He simply did not interfere with it. He let the process work. Trump's leverage over Canada depends on credibility. If he is seen as defending American workers, protecting national security, or pursuing economic advantage, his pressure carries weight. But if he is seen as protecting a billionaire's toll revenue, that leverage evaporates. The narrative shifts from strength to corruption. And corruption erodes authority faster than any policy failure. The Gordie Howe Bridge was supposed to be a point of pressure against Canada. It was supposed to demonstrate Trump's willingness to use infrastructure as leverage. Instead, it has become evidence of potential donor influence. It has become a congressional investigation. It has triggered Republican defections. It has exposed internal administration coordination that looks transactional rather than strategic. This is not a small political problem. This is a structural credibility problem. If voters believe federal policy is shaped by donations rather than national interest, trust in executive authority declines. If lawmakers believe donor access translates into policy favoritism, oversight intensifies. If allies believe U.S. commitments can be overridden by private interests, diplomatic reliability weakens. Trump attempted to project dominance. Instead, he projected vulnerability. He attempted to pressure Canada. Instead, he triggered accountability mechanisms inside his own government. He attempted to defend American interests. Instead, he may now have to defend his own decision-making process under congressional subpoena. The bridge itself is steel and concrete. But this story is about power. It is about whether federal authority serves public interest or private wealth. It is about whether proximity to the president translates into policy protection. It is about whether timelines matter when assessing influence. And it is about whether institutions can hold executive power accountable when conflicts of interest emerge. The possible outcomes are clear. If documentation shows coordination between Maroon representatives and administration officials, followed by federal action benefiting Maroon interests, this becomes a scandal. If no such documentation exists, Trump still faces the political cost of appearing compromised. Either way, the bridge threat backfired. Either way, the leverage was lost. Mark Carney emerges from this episode with enhanced credibility. He did not panic. He did not overreact. He did not turn a policy dispute into a diplomatic crisis. He remained steady while Trump appeared reactive. He allowed facts to accumulate while Trump issued contradictory statements. He trusted institutional processes while Trump circumvented them. That contrast is not accidental. That contrast is strategic. If you value investigative analysis and institutional accountability, subscribe to Canada Today. We track power, influence, and consequences. Because sometimes the real story is not the threat. It is who benefits from it.